Hey guys, this is John. Happy Friday and welcome to another episode of Climbing the Tactics Training Ladder. As you can see, I'm at 2072, having solved 111 problems, or more accurately, maybe solving 109 problems. I got 2 of them wrong. So very high pass percentage. That's what I've been focusing on in this series and what I want to emphasize to you guys yet again. Solve your tactics for accuracy. Trust me, this is the way to go. So let's dive into this session. And as always, if you want to try to solve these problems with me and you don't want to hear my thoughts before you solve them, just pause the video right when a problem comes up. All right. First problem, these are going to be a little harder as we keep getting higher and higher rated. So bishop c4, we could play bishop d3, attacking the bishop and also the queen on f6. I don't think any checks like rook g8 or queen d6 are going to work out too well, but bishop d3 just catches my eye because it's a double attack, and how does black save the bishop? They have to go to c6 or a6, maybe e6. In all these cases, I think we can take the bishop and then play queen to d6 check, king e8, rook e1. Crushing. So bishop d3 looks like the way forward. I don't have to lose time moving the rook in that case. Yeah, let's go with this. And we passed. Okay, so only one move there. If the problem had continued, though, so bishop d3, let's say, for instance, queen c6. Black must move the queen somewhere where it defends the bishop if they hope to avoid losing material right away. So queen c6, we can just take the bishop on c4, dragging the queen away from guarding the d6 square. And now the queen invades check. Black can't go to the g file. They must come here. And we can swing a rook over to the e file. Either rook e1 or rook e5 would also work. And black has to give up their queen. I wouldn't calculate any further than this from the outside of the problem. It's apparent that white will win after taking the queen. So just a nice double attack there, retreating move. Again, there weren't any truly forcing moves that were any good to look at straight away. Discovering the bishop to a different square, so playing like bishop g6 or something, is going to fail because of queen takes f1. So nice way to win material. Next problem. Knight b3, attacking the rook. So immediately we look at the trades. Also, I see there's this idea of playing c4, trying to attack the queen and allow our queen to attack the knight on b3, but black will respond with queen takes d4. I see that our queen controls h7, so I am looking at some back rank issues that black may encounter. But let's start with rook takes a7. So rook takes a7, rook takes a7, c4, queen takes d4. Anything doing there? Knight c6 not working because our queen is loose. So queen takes b3, queen takes e5. Lets black off the hook. What else could this be? c4 right away, queen takes d4 will still be the answer, I think. Maybe there's something to do with queen f3, trying to attack a8 and f7, but it doesn't look so concrete. So I'm still focused on this rook takes a7 move. How about this? Rook takes a7, rook takes a7, knight c6. Attacking the rook, also threatening knight e7, forking the king and the queen. That's looking promising. And I like that move order too. That's a nice clean move order. I don't see any way black can deal with both of those threats. So I am going for this. Yeah, knight here, hit the rook, and knight e7 being the major threat which black allows. Okay, and we passed that one. So I spent a little time looking at the c4 operation after the rook trade in particular. So c4, because this seems like a good way to attack both the pieces, the queen on d5 and the knight on b3. But always black has this reply, queen takes d4, saving their queen and being able to take my knight in the event that we take on b3. So I pivoted in my thought process and started looking at other things. Rook takes a7 should be at the very top of your list here. It's a capture. There aren't any checks that we would look at. I mean, there's queen h7, but you can rule that out in half a second. So rook takes a7 is probably the move that we're going to be leading with here. Either that or c4. c4 attacking the queen, creating a big threat. That's next down the list of moves to look at. So I had to pivot my thought process here, but eventually hit upon the right idea with knight c6, just a fork. Attacking a7 and setting up the fork, knight e7. All right. Okay, black's king is incredibly exposed, but this bishop is attacked a couple times. we can try to harass the king even further. So rook f1 check. There's also queen f4. Let's look at rook f1. That's the first move that came to mind. King g6. Unfortunately, we cannot play bishop e4 because they take with check there. So what about queen f4 check? King g6 is still possible, but so is queen f6. So I'm not sure about that one. If we take the bishop, black can take with the queen at the very least, check, and trade queens. So rook f1, king g6, just pursuing that line once again, seeing if there's anything there. Queen e5 is interesting there, trying to threaten queen h5 mate. Also maybe some ideas of queen e4. Is that fast enough? I don't know. It doesn't quite seem like it. So rook f1 or queen f4. Let's look at queen f4 a second again. Although queen f4, there's so many moves black can play. I mentioned queen f6, but also I think king g8 is even playable. I don't know if white has anything better than going back to g8. The pin of the bishop is irritating here. I wish we could get rid of that. So that's the basis for my thought process. So rook f1 check, king g6, queen e5. That's the best line I've come up with so far. Nice thing about queen e5, it also controls the b2 square, so black can't throw in a check on b2 to try to disturb our semi-open king. So what do we think black would do? They got to parry queen h5. Let's say they play bishop takes d5 check to start. I'll take with the pawn. And then they have to reckon with this possibility over here. So let's say h6. On h6, we can keep the king on the king side with queen e4 check. Drive it forward, king g5. And then maybe rook f5. Rook f5 would win there. Okay, so rook f1, king g6, queen e5 is looking promising at the moment. Yeah, that's a nice queen centralization. I don't see any way that black can counter this. And rook f1 is such a natural move. It is dying to be played here. Get the rook into the action with check. Further chase the black king out. Yeah, I'm going to try it. So let's give this check. And then pin with the queen. Okay, recapture. Again, we're controlling b2, which is very nice. So this one I think I can just take on e6. I am pausing for a half second just to confirm, but queen takes e6 is a winning move. Queen e4, there's king h6, so yeah, let's do this. Black would be forced to play queen f6, giving up their queen. Okay, so we only gained 2 points on that one, but I'm still satisfied with the way I solved it. I think my thought process proceeded logically, and I didn't examine every single possible reply black has to queen e5, but just based on the lines I did examine, especially black trying to escape with a move like h6, it wasn't looking like he was going to survive. In fact, I think I was looking at bishop takes d5, pawn takes d5, now h6, trying to slip away via the h7 square, but queen e4 keeps black's king in the danger zone, and king g5, rook f5 is winning. If king h4, rook h5 is mate, and if takes, then we pick up the queen with check. Crushing. So this one features a quiet move, queen e5. Not the easiest move in the world, but this queen centralization solves a lot of issues for white. Takes the sting out of bishop d5. It guards the b2 square, and most importantly, threatens mate on h5. All right, next problem. So 2 pawns versus 1 pawn. Black has a dangerous pass pawn. So we could play g7. And then if c2, I wonder if... I was thinking rook c4, trying to run an interference. But then rook takes c4, queen, and black queens as well. So pretty apparent white is playing for a draw here. I don't think white's going to be winning this position. So white to play and draw. g7, c2. If we just queen, black takes, we take, they promote. Nothing doing there, just scanning for stalemates or something, but too many squares available to the white king. Throwing in a check, does that ever help? So, like g7, c2, rook f4 check. We gain the ability to play rook f8, but with black promoting, it seems too slow. So g7, c2, rook c4, rook takes c4, queen, queen. We're almost stalemated there, but not quite. Ah, we can play queen takes c4 check. And then queen takes c4 is stalemate. Black controls the b6 square. So I think that's the line. g7, c2, rook c4, rook takes c4, queen. What if they play rook to c5 check, though? In between move. Then we can play king b4, they queen, and we have queen f8 check, which should draw the game. Yeah, okay, so let's do this. Stop black from promoting. So now we do this. There's also rook a4, but we're not going to worry about that one. Now this is the point. Yeah. Crucial that white be able to capture the rook so that if black recaptures, queen takes c4, it's stalemate. And just to go over a couple of the other lines that are possible. So rook takes c4, g8, queen. Black could throw in this check. Truth be told, I probably should have analyzed this one a little further as well. I kind of assumed it would work. But I saw king b4, and now if queen, then queen f8 check. Forking the king on f1 and the rook on c5. And after black does this and we take, we can stand a transition to a king and pawn endgame. The a pawn is not dangerous. It has to go all the way down here to win. We'll easily stop it with our king. Okay, so our hands seem forced from the beginning. I think g7, that's an obvious starting point, just pushing the passed pawn. Passed pawns must be pushed. I hate to resort to general sayings like that, but they're quite often true. They exist for a reason. So g7 is a natural starting point. And this rook c4 move caught my eye right away within seconds of seeing this position, because that is the way to sever the coordination between the black rook on c8 and the pawn on c2. I'm sorry I keep hitting the menus up here. I think someone told me a way I can move the menu to the side. It's like annoyingly right above the 8th rank, like directly above the 8th rank. So I'll try to fix that for future videos. So after c2, rook c4, because if we just queen here, that's not going to cut it. They can take, and then if we take, we're just going into a king and queen and pawn versus king and rook endgame. This is hopeless, even if black did not have the pawn. King and queen versus king and rook is a win. And here, if rook c4 trying to stop the pawn, black has rook g2, defending it, and then they can bring the king over to d1 and promote. Yeah, white's not going to save this position. So rook c4 here, though, fortunately saves the day based on stalemate. Sometimes with these problems, you can sense when certain themes will exist. And the fact that this pawn on a7 existed in the position made me think about potential stalemates, like b6 being covered at all times. If we end up with a black queen on c4 and it's white to move and no other pieces, it's a draw. And lo and behold, that's what happened. So, nice problem right there. Taking there. Next problem. Looking immediately at checks in this volatile position. Rook e1. King c2, and then there's either bishop e4 or rook c1. Let's say bishop e4, because that's going to drive the king out to b3. Not seeing any devastating checks after that, though. Like d7, or e6 rather, d5, b5, they're all covered. So maybe nothing there. What about queen takes f5 check? Just trying to open the d file. That must be it. Queen takes f5, knight takes f5, bishop e4. King a1, rook d1. So queen takes f5. Can white survive? I don't think so. Yeah, this is killing. Yeah, and now bishop check. Covering the c2 square, forcing white to a1 and checkmate, back rank checkmate. So that's a cutthroat problem where everything is hanging in the balance. There's just all these checks and you have to parse through them. I said the position is volatile because the black queen is under attack. Clearly the sharks are circling around black's own king. White's got the queen on a7, lurking dangerously close. And it's just a messy position in general. And the messier the position, the more likely a tactic is to exist. Like, you're not really thinking about positional chess or strategy here. It's just like, who's going to get at the other person's king or win material quicker? So I happened to hit upon queen takes f5 pretty fast after initially looking at like rook e1, king c2, and the white king escaping. But if I hadn't, I would just work my way through all the checks. I would look at every single one, like bishop e4 next. I guess there's not too many other ones. So yeah, queen takes f5, bishop e4, rook e1. It almost has to be one of those moves. And I guess I went to queen takes f5 after looking at rook e1 because the rook e1 line tipped me off to the fact that we don't want to allow the king, or sorry, bishop e4. We don't want to allow the king to escape to b3. Even though it appears exposed out there, it's actually hard to, I don't know, land a decisive blow at this point because e6 and d5 and b5 are covered, as I described. So queen takes f5 has the benefit of stopping king to c2. Okay, white's up a ton of pawns here. Wow, 6 pawns. So we're probably playing for checkmate. I don't think stalemate's going to come into play here. So first move that catches my eye, rook e3. Rook e3 attacks the pawn on f3. White could check on a8, but we always have g7 to go to. Nice safe square. Rook e3, king g4, either after or before rook to a8. Then we can check on g2, king f4. Not sure if there's anything going on there. Maybe some sort of perpetual, but I don't know. If not rook e3, what else? Rook e2? Rook e2 threatens queen g2 mate, so we should probably look at that. Rook e2, let's say king g4. Queen g2 check, king f4. Then I check on h2, king g4, rook g2 mate. Okay, so if it boils down to rook e2 or rook e3, I'm liking rook e2 right now. Yeah, I know we're abandoning our own king, but if a check on a8, king g7 always defends. I don't see why it wouldn't. And if rook e2, rook h1, there's queen g2 check, forking the king and the rook. So I think I'm going to go with this move. There's just not too many other moves that are going to possibly work here, so let's do this. Yeah, check. We got to go here, protect the pawn on f7. Wow, white's giving up the queen even. But you know what? At the end of this line, we're going to fork the king and the rook. So if queen takes f3 was not possible, maybe white could claim that the position is unclear because they do have this mess of pawns, especially the d pawn being close to promotion. But this final move of the combination, queen takes f3 check, forks the king and the rook, and yeah, we'll clean up against those pawns after that. So let's just explore that rook e3 line for a second and demonstrate why that fails, because that was my first instinct, attacking the pawn on f3. But I didn't like the fact that after king g4, there doesn't seem to be a convenient way to mate white or win material. So if check here, king here, it's a bummer that we have to do something about the undefended rook. If the rook is on e2, we can play queen h2 check here, and then king g4, rook g2 checkmate. So that was the difference maker. And I mentioned this before, but as you get better at solving tactics and your calculation improves, you get much more efficient with your lines. Meaning you'll analyze some line, and because you analyze that line and glean some bit of information from it, it will help you with your further calculations in the position. Calculations don't proceed in random fashion. Ideally, they build off each other, and that's what we're trying to do here. So the fact that the rook was hanging on e3 encouraged me to look for a line where maybe the rook was not hanging, and I could play queen h2 successfully. And that happens to be rook e2 to start. So this goes off without a hitch. Now if king g4, white trying to run away from the queen g2 mate threat, we do this, check. No king takes e3, so he's driven back to g4 and rook g2 mate. Let's press on. We're at 2096. Okay, so all of black's major pieces are a distance away from the king. Opening the f file seems logical, and f takes g6 is the move I want to play. Although, after f takes e6, we are threatening rook f8 check, king takes f8, queen h8 mate. And can black even hope to stop that? Again, these major pieces are so far away, I don't see how black is really going to respond to that without playing like bishop f7 or something. So even though my natural instinct was to take this way, taking this way looks great as well. With the rook f8 mate idea in mind. Rook f8, take, queen h8 mate. Yeah, there's no way he's going to interfere with that. So let's do this. Okay, so he moves the bishop, and now we can invade on f7. Just checking back rank issues. None to be had, so yeah, queen g7 mate is coming. The difference there is that if we played f takes g6, well, black can recapture. They can play bishop takes or pawn takes. Let's say bishop takes. And granted, black's king looks pretty open still, but it's not yet decisive. Maybe we trade and, I don't know, play the queen over to g4 or something, but the other line is much cleaner, having that pawn on e6. So if black plays some random move, let's say queen b6, offering a trade of queens. This is the main threat, mate. And you can see the role that the pawn has on e6, guarding the f7 square. Very handy. So, yeah, even though you can move the bishop, I didn't say it, but I did see that the pawn on e6 controls the f7 square and allows rook f7 to be played too, setting up queen g7 mate, so in the case of this. Okay, next one. Knight d5. So the bishop on c4 is hanging. What is the point of white's play? That is, why can't we just take this bishop? We could also take on e4, that's a hanging pawn. So if b takes c4, for the moment black is up a full bishop. Is bishop h4 the plan? I mean, I guess I could see that being playable. Bishop e7 maybe? So I think it boils down to, do we take the bishop right away, or do we play knight takes e4? If knight takes e4, queen h6, just trying to find a reason why I wouldn't play knight takes e4. Knight takes g3, there's knight g5, threatening mate here. Somehow I don't think we should entertain that possibility. So taking here, on the other hand, looks pretty good. Then queen h6 could always be met by knight g4 if absolutely necessary. So take c4, let's say bishop h4. I think bishop e7 seems to parry white's idea. Maybe knight takes e7, queen takes e7, queen h6 is a little awkward. I still don't quite believe it for white, but I'd have to think there. We're not going to play knight takes d5 because of bishop takes d5, so if knight takes e4, queen h6, I guess we could then take on c4. Yeah, that's still good. I don't like this problem. It's one of these problems that almost looks like a trick problem. You've got this hanging bishop that I bet taking it is pretty good, but it might happen that knight takes e4 is even better. So if knight takes e4 and the queen moves to some other square than h6, let's say like queen e3, then we're taking on g3, but then they take with the pawn. We take the bishop, queen h6. There's open lines to deal with there. I think I like b takes. B takes c4, bishop h4, bishop e7. I mean, knight takes e7, queen takes e7, queen h6. Even if they play knight g5, there's still not a queen takes h7 mate threat. Yeah, I'm going with this. Solved. Weird problem. Gave me a mini heart attack right there, trying to keep my accuracy streak alive. Let's explore that for a second. So knight d5. So we don't want to take the knight, as I said, because bishop takes saves the bishop, also hits the rook on a8. So it was just choosing between two apparently good continuations. Knight takes e4, hitting the queen. And not sure that one was analyzed. Yeah, it's not appearing in the analysis, but in this case, let's say queen e3, for instance, attacking the knight. And if takes, white gets to open the h-file. So black's idea would be to capture the bishop and then take on c4. But the fact that the h-file is open does make me a little nervous. Like maybe even rook takes h7 is possible here. Take, check on h1, king g8, queen h6. Yeah, now queen h8 mate and queen h7 mate are threatened, which black cannot stop. So maybe I was being overly cautious, but whenever I encounter problems like this where the solution almost seems too easy, I just double check. B takes c4. Okay, bishop d2. So it'd be nice to get in knight c2 check and mate, but clearly there's the queen here. I don't think we can entice the queen away from guarding c2. Like bishop e2, just bishop takes e2. We do get a check on h4. So proceeding down that type of logic, giving a check on h4. If we play knight c2 right away, queen takes, then queen h4, that's just forced mate, isn't it? g3, queen takes g3. Yeah, this is just a checkmate. Okay. Another good example of thinking backwards, the power of reciprocal thinking in chess. So the knight in close proximity to the forking square c2 caused me to look at various permutations of achieving that knight fork. And then queen h4 caught my eye, which if we play it immediately, I think that also works too, by the way. So if we play queen h4 to start, we could go, oh no, it doesn't quite work. I was thinking knight c2 would even be working here, but white does have king f2 in this case. So the move order I chose is the most accurate check, because everything is forced. Queen takes c2, only move, then check, and the queen and the light square bishop combine beautifully to mate. But the first line I looked at was, what was it? I think it was bishop e2. This is kind of a random line, but bishop e2 takes queen check, but white can successfully defend with this, or even king f1 would be working. But that planted the seed that it must be some combo of the queen coming to h4, knight coming to c2. So just tweaking the move order. Okay, let's solve two more problems. We've had a good session. Let's try to wrap it up on a high note. Pawn endgame. Pawn endgames are great for calculation. Okay, so black is wheeling around and trying to take the c4 pawn. So if king g5, king a5, king takes g6, king b4, g4, let's say king d4, king g5, let's say c4, king f6, g6, or sorry, I'm getting myself confused here. By the way, there's two ways you can calculate this. You can calculate all the lines straight through for one side, or you can go back and forth, with the back and forth one being a little trickier. So king g5, king a5, king takes g6, king b4, g4, king takes c4, g5, king d4, king f6, c4, g6, c3, g7, c2, queen, queen. So we queen at the same time if we go for the g-pawn. That seems to be the case. So that makes me think, what if we go for the c-pawn? So if king f4, king a5, king e5, king b4, king d5, then the kings are locked up. There's a zugzwang situation around the c-pawns. And white is getting the last laugh because of g5, g4, throwing the ball in back in black's court, saying move so I can win the pawn. Yeah, I think that's the key. I think that wins in this position, as opposed to going straight for the g-pawn, which is the obvious thing to do. So king f4, king a5, king e5, king b4, king d5, g5, g4, black has to move. We win the pawn, we win the game. They could play instead of king b4, king a4, but in that case we play king d6, typical motif. Attacking the pawn, king b4, king d5 resolves to the same position. So I feel confident about this. Let's do it. Yeah, black plays the trickier move. We do not want to play king d5 right here. So we're going to go like this. And then go here. That's triangulation. And now g4, and black is truly in zugzwang. We win the pawn and the game. It's a nice problem right there. So you have to kind of avoid going with your first instinct of going directly for that g-pawn. Oh, now I'm getting an error. Maybe that's a server connection issue. Okay, I think I just got to play this move again. There was an error processing the request. Try again. Well, that's a bummer. I want to take the free pawn. Chess.com, let me take the free pawn, man. I hope my internet's still good. Okay, I don't know why that's the case, that it's not letting me play this move, but Let me just wait a moment. But yeah, after you calculate this initial sequence, then you would probably start looking for an alternative path, because king g5 would be most people's instinct right here, going after the pawn and then just trying to win. But in that variation I calculated, we queen at the same time. And again, you could do it in two different ways. You could calculate king g5, king takes g6, g4, g5 just straight through without worrying about black's moves, and count the total number of moves it takes to do that. And then you could compare it to black going straight through and taking the c-pawn and then queening. That's probably the easiest way to do it. I don't actually have a strategy. I do both, weirdly enough. Sometimes I'll go back and forth like the line I was describing. I have no idea what's happening here. I'm going to refresh this page just to see. Okay, well, not a great advertisement for chess.com right now, but I guess I'm going to wrap up the video. I was going to wrap up the video in a couple problems anyways, but hey, that happens sometimes with servers. This reminds me of my match with Niklas Huschenbett on Chess24 with Jan Gustafsson. The first time we were supposed to play our match, and Chess24's server completely crashed. So, through no fault of Jan Gustafsson's, but it was kind of embarrassing for them, and we had to reschedule. So, it happens. Anyways, we went through some good tactics this session, kept the accuracy going, gained some rating points. Let me know if you have any questions about these problems, and I will do my best to answer them, especially that last one since I didn't get a chance to click the analyze button. Anyways, I hope you guys have a good weekend, and I will be back again soon with more climbing the tactics training ladder. Talk to you guys later. Bye.